I'm Cadence Dubious, and this is Busybody Podcast. Today I'm joined by my longtime friend, mentor, teacher. I'm so happy to have him here today, Robbie Cook.
Hi, I'm Robbie Cook. I am a tenured professor of dance at Hofstra University. I live in Brooklyn, New York. I'm a longtime contemporary dancer. I'm also a longtime teacher and practitioner of Pilates and yoga, and I love moving.
Well, I wanted to have you on because I think, first of all, obviously you have like a vast reservoir of knowledge about all kinds of things. And we met in such a funny way as you were part of my first Pilates apparatus training. Not my mat training, but my next step up in the Pilates world. Well, actually, we met at ballet class.
Right.
That's our origin story.
Yeah.
We met a ballet class, and you were the one who told me that your Pilates studio was certifying. You opened that door for me.
I don't even remember this.
Yeah.
This is good to know.
Yeah, you were like, I don't even know how we would have been talking about that, but I was very actively like, I don't want to be a nanny forever, and I don't want to teach yoga because I kind of, yoga is much more closer to my spiritual practice. I didn't want to hustle that for money. And then my other option as a dancer in New York City was to waiter or waitress, and I have never worked in the food world professionally, and so that's a whole dark path that I didn't want to start down.
Well, that's the reason I trained in Pilates in Chicago in the 90s, is because I wanted to get out of food service.
Exactly. In very practical means. I think I just asked you if you could really make a living doing that. And you were like, yeah.
Yeah. Easier than dancing, actually.
Exactly. Yeah. And you get to wear your dance clothes all day. Like literally that was part of my thought process. I was like, oh, I don't have to change.
And your clients actually think you're a good mover and you have good things to say. Whereas in the dance world, they're like, yeah, whatever.
Right. You've built an expertise.
You're so flexible and so healthy. It's like, no, I'm not. I eat burritos and drink tequila while I'm not here.
Which is the other way that we met and continue to meet.
Exactly. Tradition.
Tell me a little bit about what I wanted to have you on to talk about kind of is not like aging in the dance and fitness world as though you're very old or that we're very old, but I think that from the perspective of a lot of lay people, as we could say, or as dancers elitistly say, pedestrians.
I like to say civilians.
Civilians, yeah. As people who are not professional movers, I think a lot of people really just think, we hear this all the time. People are like, oh, now that you're 30, now that you're 40, now that you're 50, whatever the age is, they're like, my body's falling apart. Like that's a given. That's just going to happen. Or that you must limit yourself in some way. Or that the only way not to have that happen is to live this really extreme lifestyle where you're like drinking nothing but green juice and you abstain from anything pleasurable and you sleep 12 hours a night with a special mask over your face. And and so both extremes are in a way like equally distasteful. And I think just knowing you for so long, and you've definitely have been and continue to be a mentor for my practice, and just seeing you kind of gracefully be present to your own process physically as a teacher and as a mover. And I just wanted to give us time to talk about that more, because I think people don't realize that you don't have to be some kind of elite endurance athlete to also in a way learn quite a bit from somebody who's an elite endurance athlete. And in some ways being a mover for their whole life in this profession is being a pretty elite endurance athlete, just to keep going with clarity and not you haven't had all of your limbs replaced with titanium or anything.
Right. Well, I want to respond to that first, and then I could. The background is kind of part and parcel of the answering of the question. I've been obsessed once you sent me that Instagram of that guy who's in his 70s, old school moves.
Yeah, I love that guy.
I'm obsessed with him now. He's my new hero.
Yeah. It's
really incredible. And I think that the reason I like it is because of the value system that he espouses, which is I feel like it's not necessarily a takedown and more just a comment on sort of the fitness industry and how in this culture, we just sort of worship youth. We worship sort of, it's getting better. And I think you're really, I think making amazing strides with just talking about, you can have any type of body and be in fitness and be healthy, etc., which I think is great. But most of the people you see promoted in the fitness world or on Instagram are just these like sort of hot, sweaty, sexy bodies doing hard movement that, no mere mortal can do. And it's really just about diligence. It's about perseverance. And it's really, to me, it's about a mindset. I started as a really young athlete, but I was the kind of person who I could not, like, I started like football and soccer, and then I went to gymnastics, and then I went to martial arts, and then I finally found my way into dance through all of those things. But I think that the through line is that I really most fully express myself physically, and I made a big deal out of it when I switched to dance, that it was an artistic thing, because I also have a background in an undergrad in visual art. Like, I'm an artist. It's like, but I watch World Cup soccer or basketball, and they're artists too.
Right.
You know what I mean? They're movement artists. I don't think that, because sometimes we make too much about it in dance, that we're movement artists. I think the relationship with your body is an art, and it's also the container in which you live.
Yeah.
You drag yourself around in your mortal self, And I asked my wife, I'm a pain in the ass if I don't get enough exercise or don't do enough with my body, and it's not necessarily cosmetic, because I like to drink and I like to eat lots of different foods, and I like to I don't drink green juice. I've done that. I've been a vegan. I've been all types of vegetarian, all strains of things. And, now I think that you said the word extreme. And I think that's the thing I want to comment on, is that extremes are extreme, like on either end of the spectrum. And I think you have to err somewhere in the middle of the grayscale. And I remember doing a workshop in Pilates years ago when I was teaching in Tribeca, and the whole workshop was about weekend warriors and the injuries they get. It's like someone, for instance, was a football star or something, or was a long distance runner, and now they have like some finance job on Wall Street. But they used to be able to do this thing, and so they go and do CrossFit, and they blow their shoulder out or something like that, and then they come to Pilates and like say, "Fix me." And the whole thing is you have to approach it in a way that is like user friendly, right? I am now a dance teacher. Primarily, I'm a dance professor. I'm 53 years old. I love to take class, and I have a daily practice of movement just to be able to do that, just to be able to go teach classes. And the first thing I do, like when I go to campus, is I swim in the pool. I lift a little bit of weights, not a lot, just enough. And I think about Pilates when I'm doing it. I think about my form. I don't even think about necessarily reps. I don't think about how much weight I'm putting on. I think about like my connection of my feet into the floor, how it pushes through like the sort of kinetic chain through my body into the weights, and how it, like, I'm stabilizing. and how that I could stand on one leg and lift one leg and teach these adolescents dance easier if I could do those things. If that makes any sense at all.
Absolutely.
And I do just enough Pilates. Like I actually, I teach Pilates at the university, but I teach it just the floor work of Pilates, the mat work. We just got a machine. I haven't worked on a machine since the last time I was in your studio when you had the studio in Red Hook.
Yeah.
So I remember all that stuff because I've been certified since 1998. But it's like I just do enough Pilates because you can do too much Pilates. Again, with the extreme, I just do the ranges of motion you do. I'm a really firm. I have a daily yoga practice. It's not like this. I'm not levitating. I'm just doing enough because you have to extend, you have to flex, you have to twist, and then do all the different versions of those things just to keep your spine healthy. So I also believe in all of those things are kind of under the banner of neuroplasticity, which refers to your brain. An example I give of that is just to continue to sort of floss those pathways. And one way I do that is to learn new things. So like swimming is a sort of different mindset, a different way of breathing than Pilates or yoga or dance, right? And then I've taught myself to do flip turns. I've taught myself to do the backstroke and stuff like that. But you have to sort of there's like a whole rhythm to it and the way you flip. And I don't just flip and turn one way. I try to turn both ways, just like you would in a ballet class. You don't just do pirouettes on one side, you do them on both sides, right?
That's such a specific dancer brain thing to do too.
I know, it really is. It's kind of funny.
Piece it all out.
But one thing is that I've gotten obsessed with is that not this summer, but the summer before last, I'm sorry, the summer 22, I was staying when I go to American Dance Festival in North Carolina, I stay with this family. They're members of the JCC in Durham. And I went there to swim in the pool. And the woman was like, let's shoot some baskets. I was like, I don't shoot baskets. She's like, she threw me the ball and she's kind of like, come on. I could not even hit the basket. I mean, I'm short. I'm like 5'5". I was more of a soccer player, but I was sort of like, what the fuck? So I've been obsessed with shooting basket. And I've taught myself because all you got to do is okay, I dribble because I do like watching basketball. I do this. Oh, I watch somebody over there doing it. Oh, they do this with their arm. Oh, that's follow through. Right. I've seen them do that. So I've been obsessed with that. I've taught myself how to do that. And the problem solving of that and sort of the autodidactic nature of doing that, because I think also so many of us rely upon a teacher. Right. And I really believe that, of course, we'll put ourselves out of business. The reason we are even in business is because people need teachers. But there is something about, I think, having a long-term practice where you're really the ultimate, you're the one holding yourself accountable, I think is really important.
Well, I mean, in that you can always find teachers because you're in search of guides for that practice. I mean, I think that's a much better way to find a teacher than to outsource your confidence or your sense of achievement waiting for someone else to tell you you've done a good job. I feel like my best learning has been in a workshop with someone teaching me, guiding me, or in a one-to-one practice with someone, and they kind of open a window, open a little pathway that I follow. And then I think what people often miss is there's a percolation period where that learning doesn't just happen in that hour or at that weekend workshop. It happens afterwards and in between, when you're just allowing that to really soak into your system and you keep playing with it. And so, you took that moment of someone being like, oh, let's do this activity, this random activity that you just don't do. And you let that really become this fertile field of I mean, you could have taken that and been like, oh, ball sports, that's something I don't do, and taken up tennis, but you just decided to just kind of continue that pattern for no reason. And that was an intriguing pattern. And I think people don't get taught to kind of look at movement and sports and dance and play as just these different patterns to try. And that is, I think, what like the dance brain really brings. I really feel like my dance training is such a big part of my teaching. It's the lens that I move through the world with. And so I've had similar experiences. I should repost it at some point. I posted it a long time ago, learning how to use a splitting maul to split wood. It's like a big heavy axe that doesn't have a blade. It's just a big V. It's like a big steel, I'm assuming, V, but that you bring it down with force, and if the wood is dry or whatever, it'll split it in half instead of like chunking it with like a axe, with a bladed axe. And it's so heavy and it's giant, and you feel like a Viking. It's like humongous. But I had the same experience of just, this is the kind of the background and sort of the privilege that we have of being in the dance world. We're also really used to being able to pick things up and being coordinated. So when we don't physically understand something quickly, we get very like, what the fuck?
Yeah.
What is this?
Yeah.
It's like being really good at languages, and someone's just like, I don't understand why I'm not picking up this dialect. And I had the same experience of my boyfriend showing me how to use this splitting maul, and it's just a swing motion, right? Over your head, swing down on the wood. And I'm like, got it. And every time I did it, it bounced off the wood, and, and you could be like, oh, well, you're not as strong. But the tool is meant to be the strength. It's super heavy. You have to just bring the velocity. And I did the same thing of just watching his body over and over again until my system was learning it. And that was endlessly, that brought so much to my kettlebell technique. It brought so much to anything where I use force, even running, even, just things where I learned kind of a different sense of commitment to the movement, because you had to really bring this velocity all the way through this tool. And then your body can be a tool, or whatever object you're using, squatting something with a lot of weight on your shoulders or whatever. I think these moments are, from the outside, somebody could see someone who's really crappy at basketball and really crappy at using an axe. And I think for a lot of people, that's where they stay. They're just like, I don't want to do this because I'm just bad at this one thing. So I'm done, but it's not about the thing. You're not about to try out for the NBA. That's not your goal, or even just like an intramural league. And I'm not about to build myself a log cabin, but
hey, you don't know.
You never know. Apocalypse times that we live in. Being open to movement and playing with movement and seeing how your body experiences movement, instead of just being afraid of what failures you might come upon, or God forbid, injuries. I think so many people are so frightened to try things for fear of injuring themselves or straining themselves, or whatever that kind of means. Because also I would say that a lot of people think they're injured when, they're just feeling very sore, or, they think a strain is an injury, and it's just, you just went beyond your limit. You'll be fine. Just give it a minute.
Right. And that's the thing with, specifically from the dance world, they eschew a lot of weight training, and they even eschew different cross trainings, because if you're, for instance, if you're going to throw a basketball, and if you want to shoot it, a 3-pointer, for instance, you better be lifting weights.
Right.
But then again, it's also about dropping your weight. You watch the pros do free throws. They're plieing.
Right.
And they're launching it actually from the floor. They're not just launching it from here. And they're
through
using
their fascia,
through their fascia. There you go. And through their spinal connection, and then the fingertips, like at the end, or it's like the follow through. And I was like, once I started watching that, I was like, oh, okay, now I get it. Now I'm getting net rather than ding off the rim. But it's interesting, this summer as well, I was when I was at the dance festival, I always teach yoga, and I teach floor work, which isn't like dancey up on your toes dance. It's much more physical. So, and then I was working with this artist from Senegal, and we weren't doing traditional Senegalese dance, but there were aspects, it was more contemporary dance, but there were aspects of African dance within it. I was taking dance classes, and then I was going to his rehearsals. I was like, nope, I need to be shooting baskets and doing weights and swimming. and that's what I was doing, you know. And we were of course watching the NBA finals at the time too. But but it's just interesting because I think that, I guess I'm using this point to dovetail into just the functional nature of movement and what you need, especially as you age. In my 20s, I had to stop lifting weights because I build muscle pretty easily and I was getting too tight. In my 50s, I feel like I need it for bone density and just preserving and not like you're saying with the fascia, like soft tissue injuries are really much worse actually than like breaking bones and stuff like that. So I think it really sort of strengthens everything, especially at the joint level and whatnot. And I think I'm able to soften through movement more as well.
As you get older. As
I get older.
Same.
And you just, you hopefully, I don't think older means wiser, but if you really pay attention, it does. And if you're able to see the spectrum of possibility and continue to, it's that kind of Zen thing, like Zen mind, beginner's mind. If you always kind of go back to being a beginner, it's interesting. Teaching college students are so into being, I'm a professional and I'm going to be professional. They have to sort of assume this attitude of like, oh, I have to act this way. And if they get a correction, it's like the most horrible thing, or they get defensive or they want to argue about it. It's like, we all get corrected. We all need corrections. And it doesn't mean you're not good. It doesn't, you know.
That's such a thing. I've heard people tell me that they thought that they're doing badly because I'm paying a lot of attention to them in class. And I'm like, oh my God, it's the opposite. I see that you're engaged. So I want to put my energy to you. You know, if you're present and engaged, I'm going to give you all the feedback. And from my perspective, that's a good thing. But yeah, most people come from a place of correction means wrong, or attention means you're lagging behind, and everything is this, you're supposed to be on this upward trajectory. I think so much of when we're young, like you said, they're trying to have this air of I'm a professional. We really get fed this idea somehow, like when you're from your mid-20s to your mid-30s, you're supposed to be at some sort of pinnacle of whatever you're attempting. And I do remember, you know, stepping into a dance class in my mid-30s and suddenly being like, oh, I don't care anymore.
Yeah.
I just don't care what anyone here thinks. And I feel like I just suddenly became a much better dancer. And even though there were like these little 20-year-olds in class who can spin their ankles around their heads, which I couldn't do when I was in my 20s either. But I also saw, you know, you can't hide yourself when you're dancing, when you're emoting, essentially.
Yeah.
And so what I saw is a bunch of really insecure 20-year-olds with great flexibility dancing across the floor. And I was like, oh, I can only assume that anyone watching me is seeing a self-possessed, interesting, complex individual now dancing across the floor. And that seems a lot better. That seems like something that I would want to continue watching. And boy, did I spend and waste a lot of time when I was younger comparing myself to people who could do all the tricks, because I just thought that must be the only thing people are valuing, when I don't think that's really true at all.
No, and back to what you were saying about correcting people, or they're thinking when you're correcting them or giving them feedback, you're doing it wrong. And perhaps you are doing it wrong, but the ones when you're getting feedback, they see potential in you, and they're giving you that feedback because they know that you could handle it and you're going to work with it. The people that often, students who I know it's going to be like, oh, we're just going to argue and they're going to be super defensive, I let them do what they want. If they want to pay the money to be there and not get feedback unless it's positive, okay, you know.
Right. Exactly.
Which is unfortunate. I've had that in Pilates too, but
oh, absolutely. I mean, I feel like I've never been the kind of teacher, I'm not going to motivate you, you know, and I've I remember meeting some woman at a party once who realized that she lived close to my studio, and she was like, but I hate exercising. So you're going to have to like cheer me on and tell me to do it and all that. And I was like, no, thank you. No, that's not, I have the knowledge and I will give you that knowledge. I'm not there to also just like shake pom-poms and like do all these things, which isn't to say like, I definitely, sometimes I wish I could just post audio for my sessions because I literally am going like, yay, you got it. Like I get so excited when I see people make those connections. That's not the same as me like cajoling you into doing what you need to just do to be a living person.
Well, they're paying you for a service. They're not paying you to be their cheerleader.
Right. And I mean, there are plenty of people in the fitness world, I think, like whatever the biking company is, the Peloton, that's like basically what that is they're just like cheerleading you through your bike workout or whatever. But that's a different psychology. I'm not interested in that. I want to be engaged with people who are engaged in what we're doing, which hopefully is a little more self-reflective.
Yeah. I think another thing, the word perseverance comes up, and I think there was I think it's from classical music. There's like this 90-something-year-old cellist named Pablo Casals. They asked him, Maestro, why do you keep practicing? He's like, I'm still seeing a little improvement, Oh my God, but it's true. And he was, I think he was a child prodigy. He was probably amazing. Wow. And he was like 10 or whatever. But think of like Yo-Yo Ma, he's still playing, and it's
amazing that he can stay inspired.
Well, that's the thing is I think that's the mind of it. That's where everything is really mental. When people are like, it's mental, man, it's a mental game. It's like, yes, but also I don't see the mind and body as being two different things. It's not a binary for me. It's the same thing. I don't know.
Well, that's what I was going to ask you is, do you ever resent your practice? Because I feel like a lot of my clients, especially as they're aging, they really seem like disappointed and frustrated at the prospect that they would have to have a daily practice to do the things that they want to do with ease. I mean, I will say, if you have always been interested in movement, and I was thinking about this the other day. I remember I got introduced to dance through theater, and I remember this summer theater camp I was doing, we had a physical warm-up every day. And part of our warm-up was really basic stretching, like super basic stretching. But it was every day for, I don't know, however many weeks. And it was kind of the first time that I saw my body change because of doing something regular. And I must have been like, 12 or something. It wasn't anything really monumental, but it was literally just that I could see that I could like touch my toes, and that was fun. And like, we just got a little bit lower in all of our little stretches, and we weren't like trying to do splits or anything. It was super basic, just general flexibility, but I didn't stop stretching. I mean, I kind of like that when I was 12, and I kind of started a little movement practice for myself every day since then, which probably like hasn't really stopped. And similarly it was never very involved. And even I'm sure I have much less of a practice than you do, because I've never really, I think you're even more kind of determined when it comes to that. But I think the connection between being interested in movement and developing this kind of really symbiotic or organic personal practice, that's like just somebody who's interested in cooking and then you become a chef. But do you ever find that there are times where you resent having to engage with your body on that level?
There have been times in the past. When I was 48 a few years ago, 5 years ago or so, I tore my calf. And I tore my calf in a dance class. And I tore my calf because I wasn't doing all these other things. A part of it being ankle stability. I'm totally obsessed with ankle stability because I had to see a physical therapist and all this stuff. And, I was I'm a tenured professor now, but I was a professor and I really rely upon my body. So I had to teach from a chair.
Oh my God.
for the rest of the semester almost. And so, yeah, I resented, because there's this weird conceit, I think also, that as we get older, we have to do less. We just kind of can sit back and sort of rest on our laurels. A lot of us as dancers too, especially ballet dancers, because you could just say it in French or do hand things and like do 5 of these and this thing. It's like I teach contemporary modern dance, so I really have to continue to do it. And I'm also interested in it. And I think that for me personally, my personal practice really inspires what I teach the students, and I have to have a personal practice.
Exactly.
So after that, I was just, tearing your calf at 48, because I've done other things in my 30s and in my 20s, and you heal faster. It was even hard to walk around New York, in the subway and stuff. So it's like, you know what? I'm not resentful of it anymore, because I have to do these things. I mean, I'll be on a ball or a roller at night reading my book. I could still, because I think there's other things we'd rather be doing. I've heard even my students say, I don't have time to do that. It's like, if you don't have time to do these sort of tertiary, they're not really tertiary things, but they're seemingly tertiary things. Foundational, thank you, that's a better word. Then you don't have time to actually be a dancer, because you're going to be injured. It's repetitive strain. Any athlete gets injured. And,
Yeah, that's a brilliant point. I mean, that is kind of what I often feel like I'm saying when people are just like, oh, it takes so long for me to do all these things so that I can, be in my late 50s and go hiking with my family without pain, or travel and not worry about my feet hurt. And I'm just like, that it's like telling me that you don't have time to brush your teeth, like this is, this is just how you end up not with a mouthful of cavities. Like,
right. I don't have time for personal hygiene.
Yeah. I mean,
please don't come to my studio. No.
Yeah, because I think that's just like a real cultural issue that we have that like you were saying in the beginning, we value youth and this kind of, sexy moment between when we're like 17 and 22 or something. And so that's apparently what we're all supposed to aim at, even though it's already gone. Right. And so if you don't just naturally have that, or it's always being kind of marketed that some people just kind of naturally have that. And really we should all be being told how you have to work on these things every day. And that's just part of being alive. I live now in a neighborhood that's primarily Eastern European, and with that, like kind of far East European until you're basically, in Asia. So like all these Stan countries and stuff. And those cultures clearly have a built-in physical practice. And so I see people literally all ages and all body types out every day doing what I will say are amazing fascia warm-ups, these really beautiful, repetitive, bouncing, swinging joint warm-up, fascial tissue warm-ups. Obviously they probably have a different word for what they're calling those movement practices, but that's what it's doing. It's warming up their soft tissue and their joints. And people of all ages and all body types just doing basic good strength work, lunges, balance work, a lot of really playful movement. There's clearly just much more of a culture around kind of gymnastic work or martial arts of some kind, or even kind of circus work. There's definitely a couple that is out on the boardwalk every day that must have been circus performers in their youth, if not now. And I really appreciate that perspective and kind of being surrounded by that all the time, because it just reminds me that this is just what it takes to live in a comfortable human body. And if you want to be 80 years old and walk with ease, you got to spend some time warming up all your joints and your soft tissue and checking in with yourself so you can see what's going on that day.
All we have to do is look at animals. Having a dog, as we're both dog owners, what does your dog do right when it wakes up? It stretches.
Exactly.
Because it's just inherent. I mean, hilarious, adorable, and beautiful watching this little guy do his thing. And he looks ridiculous, like stretching out and doing just, but it's just like, that's what he needs to do to be able to go poop, to go walk, you know? And I think that we're so wrapped up in, you know, bad, I don't want to gaslight all fitness culture, gym culture, but like bad gym culture. I remember years ago in New York, there used to be, remember David Barton Gym? I don't know, if it's around anymore, but they used to have this shirt. There was just like this black shirt, David Barton Gym, it just said, "Look good naked." Yeah. It's like, whatever that means. But it's just, it's so like lowest common denominator, baseline, and, you know, also subject to whoever's looking or whoever's perceiving, but it's about cosmetic. And to me, it's always about functional. Like cosmetic, it could be a nice byproduct, but like you said, if we're shooting for 17 to 22, which those weren't the greatest, if those were the greatest years of my life, I mean, not that they were bad, but it's like, again, like with these sort of weird sort of ideas we have or that's put forth, I love what you're saying about these folks on the beach in Coney Island, because I'm sure they're also wearing like Speedos. But there's just like these hangups about that we have in our culture about like body shame and looking ridiculous or what we do in public, or is someone watching us? And I think, you know, those are a lot of things to pay attention to as well. Because I took a dance class this morning actually, and I know I was the oldest person in there. But again, like you were saying, I'm the only one that was asking questions too. And like, any questions? And like no one went. I was like, what? When the arm did this and this, like, that's a great question. Thank you for asking that. You're clarifying and stuff. And it's interesting because it's just watching bodies move for many years, and also experiencing your body moving for many years, makes me not resentful of my practice, because I keep learning. And I think if you're resenting those things, you're judging yourself too much. And also back to the thing with, I don't have time for that. It's like, well, what do you think your life is for?
Exactly.
Like, what are you doing in your life? Is your life only about vacations, or you know what I mean? Or just working all the time, so it's just like,
or what value? Because I think for a lot of people, I mean, this does sound like just a terrible judgment. Maybe it is. I think, you know, and literally my morning practice is like, I roll out of bed. Oftentimes it's still in bed, just kind of like moving around, stretching around with the dogs. But rolling out of bed and just doing like basically like a down dog against my bed, you know, just a really simple bent knee, you know, couple of those kind of a thing, rolling my shoulders, like maybe 2 minutes. It's not like I'm like getting sweaty and like doing a big, like, you know, bhakti breath, like practice for like 45 minutes or something. And then it's also tuning into my body throughout the day and being like, what does my body feel like it wants to do today? If I'm not teaching, do I want to go for a bike ride? Does it kind of feel like I want that repetitive thing? Do I want my joints sort of stretched in that way? Do I want to do something a little more internal, like Pilates or yoga, and kind of go deep and sort of be in that part of my nervous system? Do I have the kind of urge to do something that's a little bit more intensive, like weights or running or whatever? These are just questions I'm asking, like you would hopefully about, like, what am I hungry for? How hungry am I? Like, and do I need a nap? Like all these just sort of self-awareness questions. And I think a lot of people are rolling out of bed right into their phone, or obviously neither of us have kids, both of us on purpose. And so that's another thing.
We have fur babies. That's what we have.
Exactly. I know for a lot of people, that's the very first thing that's happening, is so they're being just inundated with their young families. And that's a different choice. And that does affect your body and your health in a different way. So, you know, these are all the choices that we're making around our lives, and what is the priority for us in those different moments of our lives. But, and so maybe there are times when our physical practice has to really be planned in a way that's like not very fun or organic, just because it is like brushing your teeth, you know. And you just have to get it done so that you can continue to function well. But hopefully we can create time eventually where it's really just folded into our understanding of ourself and the way that we live, which also makes me think, I feel like a lot of times people are doing things because they got assigned some set of exercises by a physical therapist. One, there might be not a whole lot of understanding about why that's helpful or if it's helpful, which would be my whole sidebar of like, whatever physical practice you're doing, whether it's like a HIIT workout or, you know, or your physical therapist exercises, if it's like, is it doing what you want it to do? I feel like people really forget to ask that question. Like a month later, 3 months later, is it doing what you want it to do?
Right.
And it might not be able to. If you wanted it to like make you look 17 with a six pack, it's probably not going to do that. But if you wanted to have less pain or no pain and it's still not doing that, that's something to consider. Or if you wanted to feel fitter and your spin class that you've been going to every week and you just still are struggling to get up the stairs and stuff, you know, that's something to question. But I think also people end up think their physical practice is like a chore because they're doing movement that they don't enjoy.
Yeah.
Can you speak a little bit to when you've had to rehab from injury? Because always the place where we need to get stronger or heal is often a movement that's like challenging, that's hard, that feels frustrating potentially. Can you speak to kind of creating a practice around that and whether that was hard and challenging and frustrating, or whether you're able to have a different relationship to it?
So for me, it's partially the way I was raised. Is there's some shame around. I guess what am I trying to say? And I think there's shame around injuries anyway. Like we're doing something wrong.
Sure.
Versus we're an athlete and we're doing repetitive things that create injury that, you know, they're taxing your body to such a degree that of course your muscles are going to push back and, you know, protect themselves. But I think that
if we can just like highlight that for a second, I think that's a great point. I think just normalizing that injury is just a natural part of being in a moving body and doing things to that body. And it just like
sickness, getting a cold, right?
Yeah. It doesn't mean you did anything wrong, and it doesn't mean that you're wrong. And I've always found that injuries are learning processes that are very rich. I've always felt that I've gotten stronger and better after being injured, because it's basically a magnifying glass on like, oh, that whole thing was happening for a while. That chain was setting up for a while. But yeah, anything, and including being sedentary, anything that you're doing with your body repetitively, eventually there's going to be some kind of give, because that we are living in a mechanical structure. You're running the clock over and over again. Eventually one of those cogs is going to spin out, and that you just address that. That's part of living in this body.
Yeah. And I think that, like, back to the injury thing, like I think that to get over the shame of the injury or feeling like a dumbass or for whatever reason, depending on what the things are around it, and getting over the sort of like, okay, this is going to be a long road to recovery. Here's what I have to do. I think you have to really love the process of recovery and not just focus on sort of the prize being like, oh, I'm back in a functional, a pain-free body at the end of it, and just be on the journey. Because I think that's what takes people out of their practice of whatever physical practice or athletic practice or whatever they're interested in doing is your thought process around it, and your judgment or your shame or whatever is within that whole process. Again, back to the functional, I have to walk to the subway train every day or walk my dog or what, you know, to get places. I need to be mobile enough to do that. I also have to teach dance classes and whatnot. I have to do whatever I need to do. So it's, you know what I'm saying? It's just like these baseline things. I have to carry my groceries. I don't have a car. So I have to have the stability in my joints to do that. It's really pretty basic, pretty boring, sort of prosaic things. But I think that attainable goals is the key, you know, just like you run. So it's like, you have to walk the mile before you can run the mile. Then you have to be able to run the 1 mile before you can run the 3 miles. And then, you know, you just kind of build on it. And that's what I do. You know, when I swim, people ask me, how long do you swim for? I'm like, until I'm done. How many laps do you do? I don't know. I don't count it. I don't look at the clock, or I don't check my heart rate. I'm doing, I'm trying to do it a little bit better. And the way I, sort of quantify that is, as I know myself, I know what I did last time, and I know if am I breathing on both sides? Am I reaching far enough? And when I'm doing my crawl, when I flip turn, am I doing it efficiently? Am I pushing off the wall and extending? You know, there's just like, again, I'm a big movement nerd. So it's like, I have to it's like self-observation within it. And that's what gets you out of like, oh, this is bullshit, or I hate this, or like, when is this over? I want a margarita. You know, it's just because you're really connected to what you're doing in the moment. And I know that's like a big sort of like pop psychology thing. You just want to be in the flow, but it's really true. You know, if you really care about what you're doing, you're not doing it because you want your ass to look good. You're doing it.
Because that's so fleeting and subjective. And I think what you're speaking to as well is we live in this culture that's really obsessed with metrics, and everyone has all these devices now telling you how many steps you've taken and how many this and what your heart rate is and whether you've slept and like basically what your mood is at any given moment. And I actually just got a run watch, mainly just because it was really obnoxious running with my phone. And for the run club, we track our runs, which is great. And that metric is just really, for me personally, very average and just useful to be like, oh, I was running this many miles last summer. That's cool. Like just so that I kind of know where I am. And for sure, being sick with COVID really badly and having a long recovery from that, those metrics were helpful to just be like a loose goal. But I was very aware of not getting caught in getting back to quote unquote where I was before. And I really think that a lot of what you're talking about with being present to the process is you're also really open to whatever that process leads you to. And I think for people who are doing something because they're quote unquote rehabbing, which means they are trying to get back to a place where they weren't in pain or without that injury or whatever, if your fixed point of your goal is literally just like this little small peak at the top of the mountain, when I was healing myself, I really had to be open to, I don't know what I'm going to feel like. I know that I want to not feel like how I'm feeling now. I don't know if I'll ever feel the way I did before I got sick. I don't know what my version of feeling really strong and healthy will be at the end of this process. So it allowed me to be open to let things fall away, to try new things. I never used to be someone who's like interested in supplements, and now I do take supplements because it did seem helpful. You know, before I was like, I don't need that. Now I'm like, maybe that's been useful. I don't know. I think in the past I would have judged that, and now I'm like, a nice tool, you know. Right. It helped me really investigate what I was calling being healthy and you know, strong feeling, and question, you know, what was that metric that I was using. And so really my perspective got a lot broader, which is another nice thing really that injury and illness can do for you, is help you have a much more holistic version of what you are capable of and what your health looks like. And that's just another way of looking at ourselves as we age, because I'm never going to be 10 years ago. I also
Right.
feel a lot stronger than I was when I was younger because I know myself better. When I was younger, I didn't rest enough. I pushed
Yeah.
myself too hard. I never warmed up enough. I mean, my God, my eating, sleeping schedule was all over the place. I was just a crazy person.
Yeah. Sure.
I care for myself so much better than I did now. And that gives me so much more reserve. And then just the mental aspect, hopefully you're evolving just as a person. So when I look at that guy, to bring our conversation back around, old school moves, or anyone, these people that I see on the beach who are in their 80s, who are out doing these kind of gymnastic routines and stuff, which is to say basically body weight strength work. I just see someone who seems like they're staying present with where they are in every moment, and instead of clinging to something in the past, just reinvestigating, what does this movement feel like? How do I feel like in this moment? Instead of being addicted to like, well, I did 17 reps yesterday, or 3 miles, or 45 minutes, or whatever, just looking for that efficiency they were talking about, looking for that, that functionality, so that it feels good in your body, so you feel connected. Because really, at the end of the day, if you're whatever age you are, whether you have this glistening 6-pack body or not, and I've experienced these clients who do have this, young, sexy toned body. If you are not connected physically, if you're not coordinated, if you're not grounded, it's really totally useless, if not also completely injury prone. And back in the day when I had open drop-in classes and, a storefront studio so anyone could wander in, I definitely would have people coming in with their cute, sexy outfit who were just completely disengaged from their bodies for whatever reason. I don't know. I've never met this person before, but they're in that moment, between 17 and 22. and they're looking good, and they're feeling like they're looking good, and they have like no control over their bodies. And I'm trying to, get them to just like feel their legs, and, they're flailing all around. And it's just like, oh man, that image that you have on the outside, it's going to fade. And if you don't invest in what your body is actually experiencing and feeling, you're just going to feel like you've gotten old and unattractive, and your body doesn't work very well.
Right. Well, I just think putting too much importance on, we've talked about this a lot already in this podcast, just about the cosmetic things, or just sort of these ineffable things, the things that, are how we look or how we present ourselves to the world at whatever age is going to change. And I think that's what life is for sort of confronting and being with, and then moving on from all that, from the attachment to that, maybe my Buddhist interests are showing with that. But also another overarching thing about not having resentment in your practice is that it's a way to have a relationship with yourself, and actually to have self-love, because there's a big talk about this a lot, practicing self-love, etc. Mm-hmm. It's like, that's a way to practice it. Mm-hmm. To be a little less, and this is what I have learned from my meditation practice, which I also don't really have a great meditation. I'm shit at all these things. No, but
consistent. I think that's
right. We're consistent, but I guess is you're just noticing, because what does the judgment come from? The judgment comes from expectations, and there's the unmet expectations. And I think that if you're just like, okay, I'm going to do this today, at least I'm doing this much today, and I feel a little bit stronger. Or after you move, I never want to move sometimes, and I'm just like, oh, I don't want to do the yoga, but I do the yoga, and I'm like, this is why I do it. Mm-hmm. And I'm doing that for myself, and that is a form of self-love. And I just think that that's like a huge part of it. Right. We're not doing it so we can feel attractive to find a mate, or what. Now maybe you are, that's fine, but it's just like I owe it to myself to do this, because when I haven't done it, I've injured myself. Mm-hmm. And for me, and for you as well, our jobs depend upon the functionality of our body, and the engagement around that. And I also just think that you're holding yourself accountable, and you're keeping that accountability up. And that's a way to build self-esteem as well.
It's a way to learn to trust yourself.
Absolutely.
Depend on yourself.
Yeah, you were there for yourself. And I think that's kind of a great thing. And I'm definitely, with my wife and with my dog, it's just like, if I could do that for myself, I could do that for them as well. That's how I see it, sort of like, and then I could do it for my students and my friends and family, etc.
Well, now you're really describing discipline, which I think is like, that's just a whole thing that we don't have a lot of in our culture, because we instead do force. And actually, if we're on a Buddhist track, one of my favorite books that I recommend all the time to the run club is Running with the Mind of Meditation, which is written by a Buddhist monk who ran a marathon. And he talks a lot in it about that you can't motivate from that Nike just do it place. That doesn't sustain you. To run from anger or that kind of almost violence, just do it.
Yeah.
He was like, that will get you to the next lamppost, but it's not going to get you 22 whatever miles, 26 miles, whatever a marathon is.
Yeah.
He was like, you have to learn to literally be present to every, to just feel the breeze on your face, to notice the parts of you that aren't tired, to be in a place of acceptance and awareness so that you're not struggling, because that other just do it mode is very kind of self-abusive, right? It's literally pushing yourself as opposed to inviting yourself. And actually someone in the run club was posting about hiking with her children, which I was like, oh, I'm so impressed you do that. She does these like weekend long camping trips with her really young kids. They're like under 8 years old, and they hike a bunch of miles in camp. And I was like, that's so cool that you do that with your kids. And she said, it's really a practice of holding space for their expression of their highs and lows. Because one second they're like, we can't go any further. And the next second they're running ahead on the trail, so excited. And she said she's training for a marathon because we have this longer distance club now. And she said, I'm noticing that that's the same practice as training for a marathon, is holding space for my own kind of mental highs and lows, and how much of a mental experience running practice is. And I think it just relates to any physical practice, because you're just creating the discipline to show up whether you want to or not, because some days you're so excited to go for a walk and it's a beautiful day out, and some days it's pouring rain and you're like, well, I need to do something for my body today. So then you're like trying to stretch in your apartment or whatever, and it's just like not the experience that you want, but you feel better afterwards and you show up for yourself in that way. And you stay present with what's actually happening, instead of forcing yourself to go for a walk in the pouring rain when you don't want to, and then have a terrible and miserable experience, or, whatever that is, that weird, but I think what you're really speaking to is a kind of discipline that is basically about respecting yourself and showing up for yourself, and how that ripples out. And that's a wonderful way for people to approach a physical practice, because that often is how people approach, to bring our metaphors around, a literal beauty regime, a self-care practice. You brush your teeth, you take a shower because you have respect for yourself and where you're going, right? And we all know that when we're suffering and we stop doing those things, 2020, when everyone was sitting around in their dirty clothes and unshowered, and because we were all depressed and stuff, that's always a real clear marker, right? When you're just like, oh my God, I don't even want to get dressed today. I wish that more people had that practice for their, or that kind of perspective for a physical practice. I think that would give people a lot more generosity, I guess.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, absolutely. Your body was designed. I think a Pilates teacher years ago in a workshop said this. She's like, the shape of your body is movement. And I really love that, because it's like, what body shape should you have? It's just like movement, and because that's what it's designed for, and I think it was Kelly, Kelly Kane, remember Kelly Kane? Yeah. She was talking about the anatomy of the legs versus the arms, because they're very similar, the bone structure and all that stuff. she's like, the mobility of the arms is so we can climb, we can pull ourselves up, and the mobility of the legs is less mobile, so we can stay on those legs for a long time.
Sure.
And it's just like, when you go back to just how functional your body is, I always go back to that. Sure, we look cute when we dress up, but most of the time we're going from one place to the other, and you have to just be able to do that without pain and possibly, especially in New York City, endurance.
Absolutely. I mean, I remember watching the Body Worlds exhibit, or visiting that exhibit a zillion years ago when that came out. That's the exhibit where everybody's skinned, basically. And they have all these, just kind of flayed muscle bodies in different movements, with swinging a tennis racket, climbing up. I think they had someone like kind of in a passe up on their toe. And what stuck with me forever is how many things have to happen for you to be able to stand on one leg.
Yeah.
And literally just go up a stair. And I just thought that's kind of the pinnacle of our like human physical achievement, is just to be able to go up a stair with ease and some kind of grace, to basically transfer our weight. And to then add to that, people doing that holding groceries, people doing that holding a dog on a leash and a kid, and like
in a stroller under the other arm.
Exactly. Or even talking to someone over your shoulder, going up a stair and turning back, talking to someone on the phone. We really are miracle workers of movement. This little puppy's being noisy. We're really miracle workers of movement in our daily lives, and people don't see that. We certainly don't celebrate that in our culture. Because the images that we get are always like the person doing the one arm handstand or something really wild. But, that's really what I train for, because those are the moments where I feel such gratitude for my body is everyone has to move at some point, or you're traveling and you're bringing stuff, heavy suitcase up a flight of stairs or whatever. Even yesterday I was hiking with the dogs, and we go through this trail that has a big, fence across one part of it. And I'm holding the little dog and basically have to like do this sidestep lunge to go underneath the fence, because there is no like there's no graceful way to get underneath a fence, right? Like over or under is still, you're like clamoring in some way.
Right.
And every time I do that, I'm so grateful, because it's a very complex movement. It's a big, wide kind of sidestepping squat thing, but then my body has to be horizontal, parallel to the ground. Plus I'm holding an uneven weight. Plus I have the other dog on a leash. It's a real like moment. And every time I do it and I just feel fine, I'm just like, that's amazing. That's wonderful. That's what I want. I want to pass through that moment with no other thought except that my nerd, physical brain is just like, wow, that was actually a lot of things happening, and I did that with ease.
Exactly. Because you also, and that's the other thing about doing lots of different movement practices, is I think that when I was younger, I used to compartmentalize them. Now I'm doing martial arts. Now I'm doing sports. Now I'm doing dance. The unifying thing across all of them is like, you have to shift your weight. You have to sort of regulate the symmetries and asymmetries that happen depending on your movement goal and what you're doing with the movement. And there's a timing issue. There's always a timing issue. I think about when you're talking about the axe splitting thing with a boyfriend was doing with you, and you're the first person who ever taught me how to do anything with a kettlebell. And it was just like, it's such a different thing. You're like, you're doing it like a dancer. Stop. Just push just do it this way. And it was like so interesting, because it's just, again, it's a different sort of thing. What like Michael Jordan played basketball, but then he switched to baseball. He wasn't as good a baseball player because he was amazing, but just like, because it's a different thing, and I think that there's also like some sort of grace you have to have when you're sort of switching from one thing to the other, or trying something new. You're gonna, I think that's the thing. You have to, like, I'm okay now with sucking at things. Like I sucked at I couldn't even, like I said, couldn't even hit the rim of the basket thing.
Right.
The basketball basket thing. Jesus. Clearly I'm not a basketball player. The hoop. But you know what I mean? But after a while, then I could. And, you know, but it's just like, I just had to realize, like, I suck at this right now. That's okay. I'm learning, and it's totally fine. You know,
that's a big part of my classes. I love to just be like, and now we're going to do this move that we're all going to be terrible at, you know? And I always say, I'm not giving you this move just so that we can all feel shitty about ourselves. I'm doing this because we need a litmus kind of where is our boundary. So now we're going to try this thing that I'm fairly confident that no one is ready to do yet, just to kind of show you the next way. Like, where are we heading to? Yeah. We've figured out these pieces. We're putting them together. This is where they could go. And it can be exciting. You know, let's make that exciting instead of just like, no, you're terrible at teasers or something.
Right.
But you're reminding me, a teacher who I really love, and I've only been able to take one workshop with because he's never in the States, is Ido Portal, who's Israeli and a big movement guru in some ways. I say guru just because he does have like a bit of an air about him. But he writes really beautifully about movement, and his thing is always, he's always talking about, he calls himself a generalist. He's like always asking, why do you want to get amazing at one thing? He calls those tricks. Like, why do you want a trick? Being able to run a marathon is a trick. Being able to do a handstand is a trick. You know, being able to do a split is a trick. He's just kind of like, being a professional ice hockey player is a trick. I mean, he's kind of doing that to purposely get people all upset, calling their entire profession a trick.
Right.
But he's just like, if you are really great at one thing, then you're lacking in all kinds of other areas. So what if instead you're kind of bad at a lot of things, but also kind of good at a lot of things? And I really like that. Just blew my mind open when I first came across him, because that is so key to my own practice. I can't do a split. I can't do a pull up. You know, I'm not bench pressing like 300 pounds or something like that, but I can do a lot of things pretty well, but not amazing. I'm not specialized in any specific thing, but that gives me a body that I want to live in day to day. And we both know professional ballerinas and stuff who can do incredible things. I would love to experience what that feels like, you know, for a day, a week, to just have that capability, but also a challenging body to just walk around in, you know, to be like so externally rotated, have so much mobility, have so much, you know, range in a very specific place, have not very much upper body stability. Like, you know, these like rarefied people and ways of moving look really exciting. And if that's what really gets you going, obviously, and you're doing that for your life purpose, then go for it. But for the day-to-day person who just gets kind of obsessed with these kinds of metrics, being able to just say that you can do X amount of sit-ups or, you know, bike 1,000 miles or whatever, it's only useful if it's really giving you what you want out of it, which hopefully is a body that you're enjoying being in, that's serving you day to day.
Are you enjoying those 1,000 miles that you're biking?
Yeah.
Are you enjoying or is it just like, I just got to get the metric. I got to get the thing. You know, I don't know. Like, that's more important for me than the thing. Before I got the dog, I joined a rock climbing gym for like, I don't know if it was a whole year. I don't know if you remember when I was doing that.
Yeah, I remember that.
And I had done it when I was younger, and it was fun, but I just felt, I think this is post-pandemic, I just felt like I needed that for some reason, and there was like a special going on. And, you know, when you start a new thing, again, you look at people and what they're doing, and you're like, oh, you know, they're doing these crazy things. But I was just like, just to be able to do the basic one is kind of amazing. Like, totally. I'm like, again, with the weight shifts, but you're also doing these weird moves.
Yeah, pretzel moves.
You know, like pretzel moves, and then as you get better, the rocks get smaller, and you have to like,
Yeah.
And then you get these overhangs.
From the outside, since this is not visual, you definitely don't have the classic rock climber physique. You're very short-limbed and wide and stocky, and that, you know, that's not you're not going to get picked first on rock climbing team.
I have a wrestler's body or something. Yeah. Really farm stock here. But I know how to push from my feet, which is like really what you need to do in rock climbing. It's not about pulling from your arms. It was about pushing from your arms are like to reach to the next thing to get you, and the legs really push. But I knew that much, but it was just fun. I felt like a kid. I felt like I was engaging with play and engaging with like my child's. I needed it after. That was my post-pandemic sort of thing. And then
I love that.
Yeah, but again, you know, it's like at least there's a pad you can just fall on and, you know, shake your head and we're like, Jesus, what? Of course, you're also like, why am I doing this? This is insane.
Which I think is part of the fun, right? Like, I feel like the trail races that I've gotten into, I love the insanity and the pointlessness. There's no goal. I'm not going to get sponsored. I'm not trying to get on a team. No one cares.
But you're outside. And
you're outside nature. And you're out in nature, and and that's a really playful, fun, kind of wild feeling. The real variable, like the metriclessness, like it's not road racing. The terrain changes with the weather, with the environment. It means that no matter how quote unquote good I get, you can just be like, oh, this whole trail is washed out and now I'm like picking through mud, and that's my experience today. Like I can't try and go faster than that. That's what I'm doing. I think we have we link in our culture doing things that are quote unquote good for us have to have some kind of element of suffering. And I think what you've kind of described during our conversation is that you're enjoying all these things. You're finding a game in swimming, trying to get better at flip turns. You don't have to do flip turns. You're just deciding to do that. You could totally just be like touching the side and turning around, you're finding places to be excited and creative basically within whatever physical practice that you're interested in that moment. And I think also for people who are listening, who are thinking, well, I'm not a professional mover, and you guys are drawing from a wide base of knowledge, which is true. Like there is definitely like, we have a lot of resource in that way. But I think also the way that we got that is literally just trying stuff and then trusting yourself to keep integrating it. I mean, from you teaching me, I teach weird little Tai Chi things in my classes that are from you putting that into a yoga class that I took, and I'm not even teaching yoga. So, I'm just integrating stuff that I'm learning from people and drawing on that when it's necessary. And I think, trust yourself, I say to the audience, that you have the intelligence to do that, to take from people and activities and kind of percolate that into your experience. And that is also an argument against the kind of fitness culture that is really in opposition to empowering you to figure out what's working for you and what's not. For instance, like Orange Theory, these kinds of places where there's like this is the fixed workout, we're all doing it, it's being counted, you're getting kind of like rewarded or not, like anything that's really pushing you to just kind of like finish at all costs, or like you have to do X amount, or whatever Fitbit or stupid thing is telling you that you didn't hit your steps or you didn't hit your heart rate. Like all of that is really like detaching you from your own intelligence. Because I would say if there's one through line, it's like, here we are, we're both movement professionals. I'm in my early 40s, you're in your early 50s, and neither of us use any kind of tracking devices. We're not worried about that. We're not thinking about that. It's not part of our awareness. Those are not where we're going for our information about how we're doing. And I really urge people to step into the void of just trusting their own experience, basically, and move to the teachers and the movement that's making you feel playful or making you feel challenged with the ability to be okay with sucking at it, because this is where we learn about these movement bodies. I love
Absolutely.
that the shape of our body is movement. That's so beautiful.
And just one comment on what you're saying. I'm also not a purist. Mm-hmm. I like the whole sense of the Israeli guy, the generalist, is that the reason I put little things from Tai Chi in my yoga class or whatnot is that the unifying principle with all these movement forms, because people get so attached to that's why I don't like Bikram yoga, it's the same poses each time. Well, there's also other things about that. Right. Then we're not going to do any talking about that right now. But it's the unifying principle is your body. Again, it is your body, and you're moving through these different forms. And it's not just about like, oh, I'm doing this form. They can kind of bleed in a bit. I mean, when you're teaching something or if it's trademark, that's a whole different thing you're stepping into. But I think that if it's useful, like, I think one thing you're talking about is like when in a Warrior 2, I kind of shift back and forth. Like Tai Chi. That's so you're not locked in your joints and there's potential or possibility for movement. So you're not pushing so much and holding yourself still. There's possibility for movement even on the sort of micro level within your asana. Yeah. Anyway, I'm going to throw that in there in response to what you said.
Well, I think what you just said, the through line is our body, and that's how you stop being a purist. That's how you can kind of reference yourself and not fall into whatever fad, whatever study, whatever this, whatever that. I think it's so hard to describe these things because all the words and phrasing are so overused, but it is a self-acceptance. It is a self-love. It's a being able to know yourself from the inside and, love your outside wherever you are in your life and in your practice, because it's coming from what you're doing all on the inside, and making a physical practice for yourself that really meets you where you are instead of is prescribed to you from the outside or feels like some kind of imposition on your daily life. It's so rewarding to invest in that process. That is what I hope I give people. It's so rewarding to be connected to yourself and start to really develop a self-care practice that comes from movement, that is really for you, that will just serve you forever.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and that's the thing I like to say about anything I do now is I'm playing the long game. I'm not playing the short game.
Exactly.
Because, I suffer more when I play the short game.
I think we all do.
Yeah. Yeah, that's where I'm at right now.
Well, I want to thank you so much for spending this time today. We will put info in the show notes of where to find you, and Robbie does have some delightful free yoga classes on his Instagram, which are very old now, and I'm always encouraging him to.
Yes, you will have to friend me because I have a private profile. But yeah, they're there, and yeah.
Well, we'll put info in to connect with Robbie in whatever way is possible. Thank you so much.
Thank you. It's always a pleasure, and I will see you soon.